Hallo en welkom by Fokus. Ek is Lenet Francis. Vanaand wy ons hele program aan onderrig, spesifiek hoër onderrig. Ons gesels vanaand regstreeks met die minister hier in die ateljee, Blade Nzimande. Maar eers, duisende voornemende studente het die afgelope week na universiteite gestroom om daar aansoek te doen om toelating. Meer as 119.000 matrikulante het vir hoër onderrig gekwalifiseer. Maar vir baie is voortgesette onderrig net 'n droom, omdat hulle dit nie kan bekostig nie. Beurse is ook moeilik bekombaar. En die ekonoom Dawie Rood meen duisende gegradueerdes het wel kwalifikasies, maar nie die vaardighede wat die ekonomie uiters nodig het nie. Regisseur Jolien Phyllis en kameraman Roy Freeman het die verslag saamgestel.
Is as gevolg van die swak onderwysstelsel in Suid-Afrika en 'n onderwysstelsel wat ek dink glad nie aan die behoeftes van die Suid-Afrikaanse ekonomie voldoen nie. As gevolg daarvan het ons nou 'n parallelle privaat sektor onderwysstelsel op 'n manier in Suid-Afrika begin. Nou dit beteken mense betaal belasting vir 'n owerheidsonderwysstelsel en dan betaal jy nog steeds vir die uitgawes vir jou privaat onderwysstelsel. Nou die dilemma is dat die Suid-Afrikaanse ekonomie nie baie goed doen op hierdie stadium nie, dat mense in baie gevalle net eenvoudig nie kan bekostig om eintlik vir beide onderwysstelsels te betaal nie.
Die Nasionale Departement van Onderwys eis steeds die grootste deel van die staat se begroting. Verlede jaar is R165 miljard vir basiese hoër onderwys en opleiding op sy gesit. Maar wanbestuur, 'n gebrek aan infrastruktuur en kinders wat nie op 'n vroeë ouderdom toegang tot skole verkry nie, is van die probleme waardeur die Onderwysdepartement in die gesig gestaar word. Voedingsskemas verseker dat leerders, wat veral uit agtergeblewe gemeenskappe kom, gereeld skool bywoon. Die Oos-Kaap, KwaZulu-Natal en Limpopo is provinsies waar meer as 50% van die ouers nie tot 'n skoolfonds bydra nie. Maar aan die ander kant sukkel ouers by openbare en privaat skole met verhoogde skoolfondse.
We used to complain about the school fees, but there's nothing they say they can do.
Intussen sukkel skole om voor te bly met die koop van skryfbehoeftes, die instandhouding van skoolgeboue, salarisse en telefoon, water en elektrisiteitsrekeninge, omdat skoolfooie by openbare en privaat skole in sekere gevalle afgeskryf word.
It means that many of the schools are under stress and are busy feeling the strain of having lots of people who aren't able to afford fees. So we've got to keep up the pressure for quality of education, but at the same time we've got to look at why the schools, including the suburban schools, are under strain and are struggling to keep up with the pressures that young people correctly want and expect from education.
Op 'n jong ouderdom word die idee van hoër onderwys onder leerders gekweek. Maar die realiteit is dat dit vir baie onbereikbaar is weens strawwe vereistes by universiteite.
Oukies wat gematrikuleer het, sit sonder 'n heenkome of enige plan wat met hulle toekoms gaan gebeur. Ek dink universiteite en die staat self moet herbesin hieroor. Aan die een kant sit ons met 'n tydbom van jeugdiges wat niks het om te doen nie. Aan die ander kant sit ons met 'n influx van kom ons sê kundiges wat ons uit die buiteland uitbring en so aan. En dan probeer ons nou nog kom ons sê jaarliks toenemend kom ons sê universiteitsfooie vermeerder en so aan. En baie mense kan dit net nie bekostig nie.
We really trying as students. Some of us are doing part-time jobs and just trying to get fees. Our parents are not working and we're trying to get scholarships, bursaries, and you really need to pass. Your grades need to be really high for that.
Some of these students come from far, like out of the province to come here. They pay for res and they still have to pay for increased fees.
By sekere hoër onderwysinstansies in Suid-Afrika word universiteitsfooie jaarliks met tussen 3 en 10% verhoog.
They need to have an increase. Whether the amount of the increase has to be so great or so little, I'm not certain. But I think, they do. They're striving to be better departments or institutions, and to do that they need the resources and the money.
Education does cost. We are going to have to pay for it, even though we already pay a lot of money. But we want to make sure that we actually are efficient in the way in which we deliver and that young people do get quality education.
Verlede jaar het die minister van Hoër Onderwys en Opleiding, Blade Nzimande, studente aangemoedig om by opleidingssentrums aan te sluit weens die bekostigbaarheid daarvan.
There have been institutions, colleges which are also replacing universities. So not all the students must go to university. They can still go to other institutions with the same level of qualification, which they can still develop and start their career.
In baie gevalle het studente die teorie agter die rug, maar sukkel om praktiese opleiding te verkry.
Unfortunately, they haven't risen to the task. There aren't enough good ones. So at the moment when we talk FET, we're mostly talking rhetoric as opposed to reality. And of course, we would like more and more people to go to vocational training and not simply see university as the only option.
Die vaardighede van bouers, elektriesiëns en konstruksiewerkers is wat die land nodig het om die ekonomie 'n hupstoot te gee.
Maar as die mense het met matriek en mense het met grade wat nie kan werk kry nie, dan beteken dit die mense het die verkeerde vaardigheid. En dit maak baie keer meer sin om iemand te hê met 'n standaard 8 of wat is dit deesdae 'n graad 10 met 'n behoorlike vaardigheid wat aangewend kan word as iemand met 'n graad wat nie aangewend kan word.
Rood meen daar moet 'n stelsel in plek gesit word waardeur leerders op 'n jong ouderdom in verskillende vakrigtings gestuur kan word. Dit sal verseker dat die jong span oor ander vaardighede beskik indien hulle nie direk na hoërskool verder kan studeer nie.
Net hier na ons gesprek met die minister van Hoër Onderwys en Opleiding, Blade Nzimande, bly ingeskakel. Welkom terug. Vir die minister van Hoër Onderwys en Opleiding, Blade Nzimande, was die afgelope week 'n besige een. Eers moes hy wal gooi en moontlike oplossings voorstel nadat die ouer van 'n voornemende student dood is tydens 'n stormloop by 'n kampus van die Universiteit van Johannesburg. Donderdag het Dr. Nzimande die groenskrif oor voortgesette opleiding bekendgestel om die gehalte, verskeidenheid en die beskikbaarheid van voortgesette onderrig aan te spreek. Dr. Nzimande is vanaand ons gas in die ateljee. Welcome, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, Lynette, and to your viewers. I wish I could speak a bit more Afrikaans, but praat net 'n bietjie.
It's quite okay, sir. I'll conduct the interview in English. Okay. When you took office in 2009, one of the issues that you pertinently addressed was that you wanted a more integrated system, educational system. If you had to rate our current higher education, how would you quote and refer to that status? Is it healthy for you?
Well, the situation is uneven, Lynette, because I don't think that we should underestimate the advances and gains that we have made and what government has done, especially since 1994. For instance, we have increased quite significantly intake, especially of black and women students into universities. So that is something that is very important. But what we are then having is that we have got a pyramid that needs to be inverted. We have 3 times more university students than students at colleges, for instance. And that is what we've got to change, so that we are able to get a better distribution of students in what we call our post-school system, but not just for the sake of it. It's also in terms of our own skills needs, because the biggest shortage that we have, I'm not saying other sectors do not have a shortage, but the biggest is on what we call mid-level skills, which is like your artisans and technician or technologies level, which therefore requires that we actually open up post-school opportunities much wider than we have done, and most importantly to change the perception that post-school means post-university, when in fact there are other opportunities which we intend to increase over the coming decades.
Hence the emphasis in your green paper on FETs. Why do you think has the choice always been, if you take 3 new students, that they opt for university and one would possibly consider FET? How do you change that perception?
There are a number of reasons why there is this perception. Well, the first one being the fact that people feel that universities are more prestigious, and if you have got a university qualification, you know, it's better and more prestigious. But the other problem, which we are going to be addressing, and the Green Paper talks about, is that at the same time there isn't really a relationship between programs offered at FET colleges and those offered at university, such that you can finish 3 years at an FET college. In case you want to continue with university, what we have done is not recognized at university level, even if it's in the same field. That's what we've got to change, what we call articulation. But also the other reality is that if we are to have a sustainable and quality vocational education and training system, you need colleges that work closer with employers.
So that we have the skills matching the qualifications.
That's one reason. But also the other reason, vocational education requires that whilst you study, or as part of completing your study, you must do practical work, so that we produce more rounded graduates from our vocational education and training institutions. That is why one of the things we emphasize in the Green Paper, which we have already started doing, is to bring closer synergy between employers and the FET colleges, but also take the sector education and training authorities to prioritize the placement of students who come out of further education and training colleges, so that they are able to acquire the necessary experience, often that is needed to even complete their qualifications, and in many instances so that they can actually become full artisans.
Are these FET colleges, are they quite clear about what their mandate is, where they fit into this bigger post-education system?
Some do, others do not. So the situation is still uneven. That is what we seek to address.
How do you propose to strengthen them, though, and their capacity? Because that's obviously a concern if there were provisions, but they haven't really utilized those opportunities.
Some of the measures are the ones that I have spoken about. Closer relationship with the workplace, because that improves quality and capacity, which means employers also have got to come into the party as they committed last year. But also what we are doing as government, we are actually reviewing a number of areas in FET colleges. We've visited all 50 of them now, and we know what some of the challenges are. We need upgrading of lecturer qualifications. But in addition, also we need lecturers to be exposed to current technology and methods in industry.
Do you foresee then, sir, a stronger partnership between FET lecturers and university lecturers, for example?
Yes, what we are doing there concretely, for instance, is that we are now designing, and we've started experimenting with the training of college lecturers specifically, you know, so that we move away from this situation where many of your college lecturers were high school teachers not so long ago, and they go into an FET situation which is vastly different. So that is why we also have to ensure, as we agreed with employers, both public and private, that we also need to expose lecturers in industry, and also for employers to adopt these colleges, not then to run them, but to be able, for instance, say in the motor industry, to provide engines so that we can be able to train highly qualified motor mechanics, you know, and a whole range of partnerships in that area. We therefore believe that will take us a long way in improving the standing and attraction of these colleges.
How do we address the criticisms leveled at university, for example, that we have graduates, but they don't, their qualifications don't match what the economy needs, the expectations of families and communities, and really growing our economy? How do we address that disparity?
Well, one way of addressing the disparity, we are looking at closer working relationships between universities themselves and employers, although we don't want to reduce all of education to narrow labor market needs, because we need to train rounded citizens. But in order also to do that, usually some of the employers come onto television and radio and say, well, universities are not producing the kinds of graduates we need. There may be some point in that, but the question, what are they doing as employers? They should stop lamenting, frankly, and begin to say, if the graduates that are coming out are not all right, how do we move closer to the universities? And how do we use the workplaces to retool many of these graduates? Because I believe personally, and that's our philosophy in the department, any person who actually has a university degree can actually be retooled into many other areas that the person may not narrowly have been trained in. So we are saying to the employers, please stop lamenting, open up your workplaces, commit to retooling, and let's partner with government and communities in order to be able to realize the kind of quality that we need.
We'll talk a little bit more about quality and accessibility in particular and your green paper in a moment. Bly ingeskakel na die handelsflitse sit ons die gesprek voort by Dr. Nzimande net hierna. Welkom terug by Fokus. My gas vanaand is die minister van Hoër Onderwys en Opleiding, Dr. Blade Nzimande. I wanted to ask you, there's been a lot of speculation about the targets. One being that by 2030 you would want to have 1.5 million students at university and about 4 million at FAT colleges. That would require additional universities. There's a lot of speculation about when and time frames with universities in Northern Cape and Mpumalanga. Any clarity on that yet?
Well, we are definitely going to be establishing the two universities, Northern Cape and Mpumalanga. The feasibility studies now are done. The next phase now is to move towards implementation, and we will be announcing those details, hopefully by the President in his State of the Nation address. But we're quite determined. Indeed, you are right, establishing those two universities, and ideally even more, but we are not yet there, would ease the pressure somewhat in terms of addressing the many needs that we actually have. Of course, to build a university is not an overnight thing, because the university is not just a structure, it's also lecturers, which is something also that is in the pipeline that we are also looking into, like putting in more funds for students to do postgraduate studies so that we can create more academics and researchers.
And one of the concerns that was raised by the tragic death at the University of Johannesburg was that a lot of these universities don't really have capacity. And one of the suggestions was that the application processes needed to be centralized. How does government foresee that happening, and would they then provide administrative infrastructure to deal with those processing of applications for all these universities?
As a department, we've actually made up our mind that we do need a central applications process, which will go a long way in easing this. For example, the many students who apply at any one university, they've also applied at other universities. If you have a central application, you'll be able to manage the numbers, and even be able to know where are students being admitted, so that we are able to better handle even the pressure of extra students and extra spaces, and how could those actually be distributed. So the central we are not, by the way, talking about something out of this world, Lynette. University of KwaZulu-Natal has been doing that now. Not University of KwaZulu-Natal. The KwaZulu-Natal province have been doing it now for the last 2 decades. They've got a central application system. Hence, there is less problems than we are having in a place like Gauteng.
Don't you think, though, that it, in a sense, does compromise the autonomy of universities and the identity and culture of certain universities if it's processed?
Well, first of all, let me say we are talking about applications, not admissions. The admissions will still be done by universities, but we have to process the applications centrally in order to facilitate better planning. But having said that, Lynette, I'm glad you are raising that, because some universities are even resisting central applications on the grounds that they are autonomous. I'm sorry. These are public universities that are funded by public money. We are prepared as a department to go and engage them as we work towards central applications, but they have got public responsibilities. They are not private universities. We don't intend to interfere with autonomy, but don't use autonomy to actually undermine the public role and the necessity for those universities to act in a manner that will actually enable us to respond better to issues of access.
How would you consider the standard of teaching at our universities compared to our overseas counterparts?
very uneven. We have got some of the best universities in South Africa, even worldwide. They compare very well on many criteria. They may not quite be there in terms of our own developmental objectives as a country, but also in the system we've got universities that are not doing so well. And if you ask which ones are doing well, not doing well, it's still very easy to tell. Your former white universities are doing well, and generally your former black universities are not doing well. That is why one of the key things in the green paper that we are putting up for discussion as our intention of what we want to do is actually to address these inequalities within our university education system. We need to put in significantly more money into your former black universities in terms of infrastructure, as well as improving quality, by also, amongst other things, by the way, improving the number of PhDs that we have in these universities so that we are able to produce better quality. That's why we have now a dedicated bursary fund that we are just finalizing so that we can be able to upgrade. But it doesn't mean we leave your better universities on their own. We have to make sure that also they open up, to students, such that a wider range of South African students benefit. Because one other problem we have, your better off universities tend to attract and take up the students who come from better backgrounds, and your poorer universities are the one largely who are taking the poorer students. We need to distribute the load such that even your better off universities must actually commit to take students from poorer backgrounds.
Is this the purpose of your permanent oversight committee, to advise you in terms of what's happening in terms of transformation and racism? And particularly I saw an issue of the status and role of African languages at universities.
Absolutely. The Ministerial Oversight Committee, by the way, was recommended by Professor Sodin, who had done research and interviewed universities and engaged with them after the Reeds 4 incident, racist incident at the University of the Free State. And that was one of those of his recommendation. Establish an oversight committee, especially to look into issues of continuing discrimination in terms of race and continuing discrimination in terms of gender at our institutions. So I am very determined that as soon as possible I am establishing this Ministerial Oversight Committee. We hope the universities will actually cooperate with that, because if there is one thing we have to eliminate in all of society, including the universities, are issues of discrimination, even discrimination, by the way, based on socio-economic status. So that Oversight Committee is going to be very important for us, and to work together with the universities so that we even, by the way, address together the issues of transformation in these institutions, and to ensure transparency, for instance, in terms of criteria for admission by the universities, because part of the problems we face now, many of our students, they find that criteria obscure. The point system, we need to have more clarity in those things so that we try and eliminate as much of the unnecessary problems as possible.
To what extent is there deliberation and synergy between you and the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, in terms of where she wants to go with basic education and how that, in a sense, fills the gaps that you see in higher education?
Cooperation between the two departments is absolutely essential, Lynette, because the fact that we have two ministers of education does not mean we have two education systems. We have one education system. The president, in his wisdom, which was correct, was to say, let's have two ministers to focus on the two components. We do indeed work together. There are a number of areas that require us to work together. One of those being teacher education, because your school teachers are being trained in higher education. So we need to make sure that we provide, including the issue of African languages, the need to increase teachers who are able to teach in African languages for the foundation phases, so that students, when they start the first 3-4 years at school, at least they are taught in their mother tongue. The other area of cooperation, of course, which we want to increase, is career guidance, because part of the problems, many of our students reach universities or colleges not knowing what they want to do.
Minister, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Continued discussion certainly necessary. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye, thank you, Lynette.
Nou voordat ons groet 'n regstelling tydens ons Kersdag uitsending het ons die naam van die burgemeester van die Knysna munisipaliteit verkeerd gehad. Die burgemeester van die munisipaliteit is Jolene Wolmerans. Ons vra om verskoning vir hierdie fout. Dit was dan vanaand se Fokus. Kykers se kommentaar en voorstelle is altyd welkom. Skryf net die woord Fokus, gevolg deur 'n kort boodskap en SMS dit na 34444. 'n SMS kos R2. En u kan gerus ook 'n lid word van ons Fokus groep op Facebook. Van my, Lenet Francis en die res van die Fokusspan, totsiens tot volgende Sondag.